B'Shem Hashem Na'aseh v'Natzliach, Shiur Torah, Bruchim Habayim. We are starting a new week, BeEzrat Hashem, a new Chodesh, a new week, and another new Shiur, BeEzrat Hashem, continuing our series of the Jewish HaShkafa, based on a sefer by the Chazon Ish. Tonight's Shiur will be for Ilui Nishmat, Sarah Leah Bat Aryeh Hershel Chaim, and also for the Refuah Shlema for Rav Ephraim ben Shulamit, Rabbanit Sarah bat Anat, Rabbanit Levana bat Sarah, Avi Mori David ben Esriya, Imi Morati Doris bat Zora, and also for Atzlacha Rabba and Zera Sheikaima for Aryeh Hershel Chaim and his dear wife, and also Atzlacha Rabba for Marsha bat Julie, Ayla bat Marsha, Samuel ben Marsha, Cephas ben Marsha, Alexander ben Marsha, Louis ben Marsha, Shaul ben Farzane, and all of Am Yisrael, BeEzrat Hashem, will have Refuah Shlema, Refuat HaNefesh, Refuat HaGuf, Atzlacha Rabba b'Kol Ma'aseh Yadeim, BeEzrat Hashem, to them and to all the righteous Noahis that continue to contribute, continue to watch our shiurim, continue to grow in their Avodat Hashem. Okay, so brief update because there's an enormous amount of material we have to go through tonight, BeEzrat Hashem. The campaign for Purim is continuing to go on. I highly recommend that everybody do their best to give now versus wait till last minute, which is the normal tradition for people to do. Just number one, we learned from Avraham Avinu that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him to do the Akedah, to in essence put his son Yitzchak as a sacrifice, the Torah says that Avraham Avinu kam baboker. He woke up early in the morning. He expedited to go do it early on. He could have done it a day later. He could have done it at any other time, but he chose to do it very early. This is one of the ways that we show HaKadosh Baruch Hu that we love his mitzvot. The same goes with the Isha Elokim, Moshe Rabbeinu, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him that after this war, your life in this world would end, and Moshe Rabbeinu did not delay for even a minute, and he told Am Yisrael that they're going to war with Midian right away. And the people that heard that after this Moshe Rabbeinu would die, they didn't want to go to war, and Moshe forced them. They said, no, this is our servitude of Hashem. There's a mitzvah in our hands. We have to go do it as soon as possible. So, lehavdil milyon v'chetzi avdelot, very big difference between the big mesirut nefesh sacrifice that they had to Avraham Avinu and Moshe Rabbeinu did, putting their own lives and their child's life, on the line here, for us to give a little tzedakah to feed some poor Jewish people in Eretz Yisrael, I think is a little easier. So, at the very least, we should be expediting these mitzvot like they did. The second reason for it is because the way it works is that the mitzvah itself needs to be done on the day of Purim. But since it's not possible for us to estimate how many baskets of food we're going to need, we're not prophets or sons of prophets, therefore we have to get as much money as possible ahead of time, buy everything ahead of time, and then get everything set up for that day for the people to come on Purim itself to come pick up their baskets of food and so on. And anyone that cannot pick it up, we send them deliveries. So it'll cost a little bit more, another, 40, 50 shekels or so to deliver it to those people that are sick and can't make it. But nonetheless, we make sure that they get it. The point being is, we need to get as much money as possible ahead of time so we can actually include it in this mitzvah. Now, of course, a person that gives a week later the money is still going to go to poor people. We're not going to say no. But again, someone that is particular about fulfilling this particular mitzvah of helping the poor on Purim needs to do it as soon as possible. Don't wait for the last minute. That's the first thing. We have the campaign. We made a very easy link for you guys to remember. It's bhpurim.org. B as in BeEzrat, H as in HaShem, Purim, Go there, donate, be generous. We're feeding, poor people in Eretz Yisrael. Baruch Hashem, there's a lot of them, and we're going to try to do whatever we can to give them a respectable meal, no less than any of our meals. That's the goal of BeEzrat Hashem since the beginning. We're not one of these organizations that raise a lot of money and gives people a piece of cheese. We want people to have a nice event, a nice holiday, and we try to make sure that we do our best to prepare. So with that being said, we have our event scheduled for the 23rd of March. We're only a couple of weeks away. And BeEzrat Hashem, I know there's a bunch of people coming from different places that BeEzrat Hashem we haven't seen before. So we're looking forward to seeing them. And of course, all of the people that have already come, BeEzrat Hashem will see them too. So there's other updates, there's other things to do. But we have a shiur in our hands. BeEzrat Hashem will go over the other updates later this week. So now the Chazon Ish, although the book is called Emunah v'Bitachon, Faith and Confidence in Hashem, over the last several weeks we haven't really discussed necessarily Emunah and Bitachon in its practical sense as far as believing through difficult times, but rather we've been talking about Emunat Chachamim, the faith we have in our sages, the faith that we have in the system itself. But of course, there's always a test that the Hashem will send a person to make sure that they realize that it's not just the logical laws that you have to comply with, but even the illogical laws. And there's a reason why the heretics out there actually succeed in capturing neshamot and even making those neshamot the victims of their heresy, making them feel like they're making the right decision by following these heretics. And usually it's pertaining to the heretics making fun or minimizing what's called the chukim, which are the illogical laws, the laws that are not of human logic, but rather of divine logic. But nonetheless, the keys to understand is that we have two sets of laws from the Torah and our sages, which is the logical laws, and also which is the mishpatim, and the illogical laws, which is the chukim. So over the last couple of weeks, as we've been talking about how a person must have confidence in the sages, must have confidence in the rabbi that they are learning from, to such an extent that they simply cannot view their rabbi or the great sages of the generation, and needless to say the ones of previous generations, as people with a bias, as people that have the similar mentality that regular people have. Because the second that you view the sages of previous generations, or even your rabbi, as someone that's just like you, that it's you could not only relate to their teachings, but you figure that since you want, they want, since you need, they need, since you think, they think. The second you view the chacham as someone that's equivalent to you, that's when the respect starts to fall, very fast, and that's when you stop listening. And of course, this is one of the tools of the Satan, to enter our minds in different ways to make people think that, yes, what's the big deal that he knows? I could also know. Even though I don't know, I could also know. What's the big deal that he did this? I could also do it. I just didn't get a chance. And a lot of different convoluted thinkings that the Satan will put in people's minds to make people feel as if the Chacham has a bias of some kind, an agenda of some kind. And unfortunately, this happens on a regular basis. I have told you at least a couple of times over the years, one of the most painful, if probably the most painful for me personally, things to see is that, it's beautiful to see people grow closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. People, use our shiurim as a vessel to get themselves closer to Hashem, whether it's to do tshuva from starting from scratch, or to abandon idolatry and become, very holy people, holy Jews, or even holy Noahides. Or it's people that were frum, but more like robots, and now are officially part of Klal Israel with 100% dedication to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it's wonderful to see that. It's the fuel that keeps us going. But unfortunately, the most painful part is not the bad news that you get from people that tell you that they're getting a divorce, or there was a death in the family, chas v'shalom, or sickness, all types of tragedies. Those are very painful, but they're not the most painful. The most painful thing, personally for me, and I know that it is the same for others that I've spoken to, is when you see someone go in the right direction, start getting closer and closer to HaShem, do tshuva, get closer, do everything, and then all of a sudden decide that they no longer need these teachings, they have graduated them, if you will, they no longer need this, and they figure that they could do better on their own, and you know that this is just the beginning of the end. And you don't wish them bad, you don't wish them to fail, but it's unfortunately a reality. Now, of course, the naysayers, the haters are gonna, the lefty liberals, they're gonna say, wait a minute, what are you expecting people to watch these shiurim forever? I don't expect anything. Everybody can choose to do whatever they want, because, of course, everybody has free choice. But the reality is that when a certain neshama is connected to the truth, through a certain fashion, through a certain way, whether it's through these shiurim or some other fashion out there, there's a reason for that. It's not just because of the words. It's not just because of the time. There's a reason for it. And unfortunately, when people break that bond, they're causing severe damage that is many times is unrepairable, that gets to a point where it's a continuing downward spiral. Now, of course, the haters and the naysayers are going to say, wait, so that means this is a cut. This is a cult. The definition of a cult is you want people to just follow you. I don't want anything. People can simply do whatever they want. But the reality is that you see horrible things happen to people that break off, that stop watching. And it's not that you want it to happen. It's just that you see it happening. You see a person do great 2, 3, 4, 5 years. All of a sudden, somebody or something entices them to stop. And then, they come back a year later, 2 years later, saying, listen, I've fallen. I don't know how to get up. I used to be really modest. After I stopped listening to you, I thought I can get better somewhere else. 6 months later, I was no longer modest. A year later, I was no longer shomer nagia. Now 2 years later, I'm pregnant and I don't know who the father is. HaShem yishmor v'yatzil. Or all types of horrible things that happen to people. And I'm telling you, it's the most painful thing in the world, because you saw a person literally uplift themselves from Gehenom that they were in, put themselves on a fast route to heaven, to Gan Eden, and then simply decide, nah, I don't want it, and go somewhere else. And it's a horrible thing. And it's very, very painful, because you know how hard it is to get up the first time. And you also know that it's even harder the second time. It's even harder the second time. And unfortunately, this is one of those things that is part of the business, if you will, that the more people you get to, the more people you help, the more times you're going to see these painful experiences, unfortunately. And I highly, highly recommend for people to understand that if you are committed to the truth, you're committed to learning the truth, it's not something that you can just shop around for. It's not something that you can just buy like you buy apples in the street. If it was, I promise you, I'd probably be, in some cave learning by myself and not doing this, because there's a lot more that I want to learn that I can't learn. But since the truth is hard to find, we have a role in the world, we have to do it, and people simply do not understand how scarce it is, how hard it is to find the truth out there. There's a few teachers out there that teach the truth and have different styles and ways of doing whatever it is that they're doing, and that's fantastic, and I always applaud them and I always cheer for them. But unfortunately, the heretics are much more abundant. Just like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai practically prophesied in the Zohar HaKadosh, the same as the Gemara itself says, that before Mashiach comes, there's going to be a lot of heresy, a lot more than there is going to be truth. In fact, the Gemara in Masechet Sotah says in the page 49b that truth will be hated. Truth will be hated. And many times you see people adopted the truth, they love it, it changes their life, and just something happens. And it could be the stupidest thing. It could be just one small thing that the rabbi said. You've heard him for 1,000 hours. You've heard him for, 2,000 hours. Everything was great, changed your life. One time he said something, or you misunderstood something, or you did understand something the right way, but you didn't like it. Whatever it was, you got rebuked personally. You didn't like it. And you say, you know what? I'm cutting ties. This is the beginning of your end. You have to know this, because it's not something that you can easily replace. I can promise you that I've had personal experience with this, not just with students, but also myself. There's ups, there's downs, there's all types of things. But one thing that a person needs to know is that the heretics are looking for weak people. And why? Because weak people, people that have been hurt in some way, people that have been offended in some way, people that have an axe to grind, those are usually the ones that are the most venomous. And unfortunately, what ends up happening is that they get those people and they end up using those people to create the most amount of damage. And that makes it even more difficult for those people to recover. And it's sad for me to see some people that I've spent enormous amount of time with and resources to help them get to the truth, just simply throw that into the garbage. And again, I'll continue my life. I have, HaShem, tens of thousands of people that I have to help. It's no shortage on my end of work. It's just a reality that you feel bad because people simply use their ego as their navigation system instead of using their mind. What worked for me? Okay, that's what I'm going to stick to. So now the one thing that the Chazon Ish has mentioned to us over the last several weeks is that many times the heretics, the fools, the ignoramuses that know how to speak well, know how to present well, know how to mock well, and know how to speak in such a fashion that they exude such confidence for the little that they have, that it seems like they have the whole world in their hands. And anyone that has heard my lectures know exactly who I'm talking about. And unfortunately, what they do is they try to manipulate the truth in such a fashion that it makes sense. And many times it does make sense, even if it's wrong. I even had one of my students just a few days ago tell me, listen, I was looking up something for you, and I saw this thing, and I ended up listening to this guy for like 20 minutes. And if it wasn't for all the stuff that I heard, and read and everything, honestly, he almost convinced me. He almost convinced me of his lies. And I told myself, I'm like, it's how dangerous it is. Someone that could be learning for 5, 6, 7 years literally can fall in 5 minutes. And it's very important for you guys to protect your neshamot. Why? Because the more precious your neshama is, the more Torah your neshama has, the more good you do, the more susceptible you are for these attacks. And unfortunately, it's not everyone is going to hear this. Some people that have already fallen will probably not hear this anytime soon unless they have some special merits in Shemaim that Hashem allows them to hear this. The key and the reason why I'm telling you this is because it has everything to do with what the Chazon Ish is talking about over the last few weeks, where he's telling us that people simply compare the scholars to themselves, where they have a perverted mentality in how they evaluate things, and they think that the Chacham evaluates things the same way. They figured that they would bribe, so therefore they would, they think that the Chacham would bribe. They would eat this, so therefore he would eat this. They would do this, so therefore he would do this. And this is unfortunately a very, very sad reality that's out there, especially today, since I know that in the American part of, and also the Anglo-Saxon world of Judaism, where rabbis many times have become friends with people, and many times these rabbis have become such good friends of people, they've decided that they're going to be their coaches, not their rabbis. And there's a world of difference between a coach and a rabbi. A coach is someone that gives you advice and you pay for it. Whether you listen to it or not, it's your business. The coach, aka rabbi, got paid, did what he had to do, give you the advice to the best of his abilities and knowledge, and you can listen to it or not listen to it. But he doesn't have any qualms about you ignoring him or you listening to him because he got paid. His bias was fed. The rabbi, on the other hand, that does not get paid, gives you advice and cares a lot about whether you listen to him or not. Why? Because if you do not listen to him, you're simply putting your eternity in danger. And that is the difference. Now, of course, people respect more of what they pay for than what they don't pay for many times, but this is obviously the mistake. So this is also part of the reason why I told you guys, I think it was in the event that we had recently, where people asked me about, phone calls and talking more and socializing more, and I specifically explained, there's a whole section, one of the questions that was asked about that, and I specifically answered that to let people know that to be friends is something that is with me, is something that is against your best interest. You don't want to be my friend. Because the second that I'm your friend, you're not going to want to listen to me as often. This is the reason why I don't call people to ask them for money, even though we need it. I don't ask them for favors, even if we need it. Why? Because I know that the second that bond changes from student-teacher to friends, then your eternity is in danger, not mine. Your eternity is in danger, and your eternity is much more valuable to me than any amount of money or any favor you could ever give. So it's important for a person to know that it's the teachings that we have here is not my own. It's Chazal, it's our sages. And our sages specifically talk in such harsh language, sharp language, and really clear language to let us know what it means to listen and what it means not to listen. Now, over the last couple of weeks, the Chazon Ish has explained to us that those that justify bribes always have some type of sophisticated, convoluted reasoning for their behavior. They have whatever reason to do whatever evil they're doing. In their eyes, it looks good. In their eyes, it looks kosher. And the Chazon Ish is trying to explain to us time and time again that this particular bribe is not just bribe of money, but also bribe of reputation, bribe of getting likes on the internet in today's generation, popularity, a stage, acceptance, and so on and so forth. There's all forms of bribes. And if a person does not monitor themselves that they are not following the bribe versus following the emet, they could easily fall prey to it. It's not one of those things you could just ignore because you were born in a certain way and you don't care about things like that. No, the Satan is much smarter than that, and he's going to come to you in different ways. Sometimes the bribe comes from a student, sometimes the bribe is the student. Sometimes the bribes is your inner nature, your inner desire. Sometimes the bribe is something that you don't even know that could even exist. It's very important for each one of us to evaluate ourselves very, very carefully, because the Gemara in Masechet Chulin says in page 44, I believe it is, that Ezeu Chacham, who is a Talmid Chacham, who is a wise person, a person that can check his own animal and see that there is arguments to make sure that it's kosher, and there's arguments that it's trefa, that it's not kosher. And he chooses the trefa. Not because he wants to pretend like he's some tzaddik, not because he likes to lose $20,000 on some cow, but rather because he wants to stick to the truth even if that truth hurts him. Even if that truth hurts him. So that shows that chacham has the tools, he has the knowledge, he knows what's kosher, what's not kosher, what's the signs, what's not the signs, but he also knows that sometimes there's a bias. There's an inner bias with a monetary gain or loss and so on, and he knows how to eliminate that bias and stick to the black and white law. But what happens when it comes to something that's not necessarily black and white, something that's illogical? And that's where the Chazon Ish elaborates on bribery, giving us a curveball to everything we've learned thus far. So far, bribery seemed like it was clear-cut. Everyone here understood what it is. You can be bribed by your own desires. You can be bribed by money. You can be bribed by all types of other things. Everything seemed logical, and we even looked at the Sefer HaChinuch, where he gave us an elaborate explanation of how bribery is viewed as an abomination by HaShem. Also, the Rebbe Misatmer gave us a chidush of a lifetime, explaining to us that when a judge is bribed, not only is he a danger to himself, but also he is going to be a danger to the other judges, because due to the fact that he is now bribed, he now speaks about that position in a much more excited manner, in a much more enthusiastic manner, to the point where he could convince the other judges, even if the other judges are greater than him, he could convince the other judges, and therefore becomes a danger to the entire Beit Din, where he can no longer justify saying, listen, even though I got bribed and I want to make my so-called client, happy, there's two other judges on the Beit Din, so they're not being bribed, so, there's really no risk here. It's still kosher. No, says the Rabbi Yoel Misatmil. Says, no. Once you're bribed, the whole Beit Din is in danger. Why? Because you're now going to represent that case as an attorney and not as a judge. So now we have all of this in our hands. Everything makes sense. Everything is logical. Comes the Chazon Ish and throws us a curveball and says the following. והנה אין עזרת השוחד מכלל המשפטים, אלא מכלל החוקים, שהרי לא אסרה תורה הוראה לעצמו, ואדם רואה טרפה לעצמו, אף אם הוא דל וכל חייו תלויים בו, והוא מורה וחמץ שעבר עליו הפסח, אף ברכוש גדול, וכשיורה להיתר ואחד הנרגנים, יערער אחריו כי הפסד ממונו יטעתו, הרי זה מן המערערים אחר רבם. ואנו בטוחים בחכמים שאינם מורמים מפתיחויות כאלה, ולא יחשדו בם אלא קטני הדעת נעדרי בינה אשר לא ידעו ולא יבינו נפש משכיל. Translation: the warning against taking bribes is not of the Torah laws called mishpatim that could be readily understood. These are the mishpatim. Rather, the warning against bribes is one of the decrees that are beyond our full understanding, i.e., chukim, the illogical. As a side note, what is the difference? What is the difference? Now we just had a brief difference. We have a brief difference. One is logical. You understand not to murder. The Torah says not to murder. You understand not to murder. That's a mishpat. But you have a chok. A chok is something that's not logical. For example, you have a law that you have to observe Shabbat. And there are 39 restrictions on Shabbat, 39 melachot. And one of those melachot is don't write. The Mishnah in Masechet Shabbat elaborates, what does it mean don't write? It says anyone that writes 2 letters has violated Shabbat. Has violated Shabbat. And he is chayav. Meaning that if he wrote the 2 letters and there's witnesses, they tell him don't do it. It's Shabbat. You're going to get death penalty, stoning. And he continues. They stop him and they stone him to death. What did he write after all? The word dag, fish, da, no. What did he write? 2 letters. In fact, even if he didn't write the 2 letters, he is about to write. He's about to write. And he has the pen in his hand, which is muktzeh, but it's a rabbinical law, muktzeh. But he's about to write. And you're like, oh, you and your friend, Dave and Shmuel, both looking at, hey, don't write. It's Shabbat today. If you write, it's Chilul Shabbat. There's death penalty, skila. It's like, no, come on, I'm just writing a couple letters. No, what do you guys care? What is it, you losing ink? What do you care? And he's about to start. They stop him and they stone him, even before the 2 letters. But the 2 letters in itself is chayav. It doesn't necessarily need to be more. It doesn't even need to necessarily be 2. But the point being is the Mishnah says 2 letters, he's already chayav. Now this is a law, but it's in the category of chukim. Chukim meaning the divine laws that are not of human logic. One of the ways that you know that something is a divine law that's part of the chukim, says Rashi HaKadosh in the Torah, that in Parashat Chukat, that chukim are laws that the goyim and the heretics make fun of us about. No, what do you care about whether it's he writes 2 letters or he doesn't write 2 letters? What, HaShem is running out of ink or something? What do you care if the fish has 2 signs or 1 sign? Listen, the Torah said 2 signs, but whatever, he got halfway. It's a good fish, $300 fish. You're just going to let it go. If you don't eat it, it's going to go to waste. Chaval, there's another mitzvah called Bal Tashchit. Don't be wasteful. So he has the fins. So what if he doesn't have the scales? Maybe he used to have them. He just got, I don't know. But eat it. You say, no, not allowed. No, you really think God cares about this fish having a fins and scales? Look, there's even a fish that's called tuna. That's actually not kosher. It's tuna, but it's not kosher tuna. So you could just say, listen, I made a mistake. It's tuna. It had the fins. I didn't see the scales. So what? What's the big deal? You think God really cares about that stuff? Yes. That doesn't make any sense. Exactly. But he still does care. He still does care. And it's still a violation of the Torah. And there are countless laws in the category of chukim that the heretics and the Gentiles, idol worshippers, make fun of us. And I remember as a kid, when I went to public school here in America, and although we didn't observe Shabbat, and we didn't observe most of the Torah, I was brought up in a traditional house that my parents taught us kosher. It's one of the things that we always keep. And I remember that we kept kosher to our best understanding, which is wrong. Our best understanding was as long as you're not eating pig, and as long as you're not eating meat and milk together, and as long as you're not eating non-kosher meat, you're fine. Meaning you could eat non-kosher pizza because you're not eating milk and meat. Little do you know, the pizza sauce has meat in it, and so does the cheese many times, have all types of meat in it. You could eat salad at a non-kosher place because it's just vegetables after all. Little do you know that the vegetables in the non-kosher restaurant also have lots of bugs in them and all types of other interesting creatures you wouldn't want to eat even if you weren't Jewish. But nonetheless, they don't have the obligation not to eat these things, so they're not as careful about washing their vegetables and cleaning them like Jews are obligated to do. Because for a Jew to eat a bug, it's 6 different sins. 6 different sins, like it's like he ate pig 5 times. Meaning that eating a non-kosher a salad at a non-kosher restaurant is worse than eating pig at times. This is not to justify eating pig, but just to give you guys an understanding. So the logic of someone that didn't learn Torah is naturally wrong, but needless to say, you don't know how wrong it is until you learn Torah. So I didn't eat non-kosher meat. I tried it a few times as a little kid. May Hashem forgive me, I was only little, but nonetheless, tried it, didn't want to continue, wanted to, keep, some part of me connected to the source, and I would eat kosher food, or what I thought was kosher. Now, I was in a public school, had a lot of Italian kids that were my friends and black kids that were my friends. And, the black kids were always respectable. They didn't really care so much about whether I ate or I didn't. They would just be some of those people that always ask me questions. The Italian kids always like to make fun. And one of my friends would tell me, listen, why don't you look at this burger? It's much bigger than what you're eating over there. Come, take a bite. I'll bless it for you. And he thought it was funny, and everybody else thought it was funny. I didn't really particularly find it funny. But it was the joke of the day. How often? On a weekly basis, sometimes even more often. I'll bless it for you. And this wasn't even necessarily just him. I even had some Jewish friends growing up that weren't observant at all, and they would eat their non-kosher meat, and I would say, no, I'm just going to eat when I get home, or I'll eat something else, or whatever it is. No, come on, just eat. Come on, eat with us. We're in a restaurant. It's a cool restaurant. I'll bless it for you. I'll bless it for you. And they thought it was funny. They thought it was just a blessing on the meat. Now, although I didn't know much, I knew that blessing it is not going to do the job. The point being is that when you explain a non-Jew kosher laws without the foundation, without the rest of the Torah, without everything else, especially young people, it doesn't make any sense to them. And in fact, it seems strange. And in fact, it is strange to somebody who doesn't know Torah. Because these laws also have not just the laws that are mishpatim, but they also have the chukim. And many times you'll have different parts of the law be a chok, different parts of the law be a mishpat. But nonetheless, the issues of bribery that the Chazon Ish has been talking about, until now, we viewed it from the perspective of it being a chok, of it being a mishpat. A mishpat being, it's logical, don't take bribes, makes sense. But the Chazon Ish says, no. It's not a mishpat. The whole thing is a chok. The whole thing is a chok. Why? Why is the whole thing a chok? Why is the whole thing a chok? So he says the following. The warning against taking bribes is not one of the Torah laws that can be readily understood as mishpatim. Rather, it's one of the decrees that are beyond our full understanding. And the Torah did not disallow a person from deciding on a halachic manner pertaining to himself, whereby one is allowed to examine his own animal and decide whether it's kosher or not, even if he is poor and his very life depends on it. He can also decide on the matter of chametz that's owned by a Jew, meaning himself, during Pesach, and may therefore not be eaten after Pesach, even if this chametz is of great monetary value. If he decides that it's permitted to eat it, and some fault finder, what I like to call naysayer, or one of these people that like to see whatever is wrong, you speak 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 videos, each one of them is 2 hours or more, they found 40 seconds or 4 seconds that didn't like. Some fault finder comes and says that the decision that this Talmid Chacham made to eat this food, whether it's a meat for kosher issues or it's chametz or otherwise, this fault finder says that the decision was incorrectly dictated due to his own material considerations, and therefore this fault finder will be violating the prohibition of questioning the decision of his teacher, of his own rabbi. Now, here, we have to elaborate. You have a situation where a person has a whole cow. He doesn't have much money, but he has invested in this cow, and now shechts this cow, or has somebody shecht it, and according to the law, is a little bit of a question on whether the shechita itself was good, or whether there's something on the lung. There's a question. Now, here, it's not like telling somebody, don't eat this sandwich or not. A sandwich that could be only a few dollars. This is a question of thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars, depending on where and when. And it could also mean that person's entire livelihood. Could be, as it is often, one of his his way of making money, his way of supporting his family, and so on. So to judge on that, the Torah says, we have no doubt that if he sees that there's a problem, despite the fact that this problem would mean that he has to get rid of this cow, lose a fortune, and may not even have money to eat as a result of it, we have no doubt in our soul, in our Chachamim, that they will make the right decision. They will not eat it. But the second somebody pays him $100 and says to him, listen, I want you to check the cow that we just shecht. Already at that moment, we know that there's a bias that we have to evaluate. He's what's called in Hebrew nagua. He's biased. And we have to evaluate it. Wait, so you're telling me when there is $20,000 on the line, that's his own cow, we have no concern. When there's $100 on the line, just providing a service, that already gives us concern. And we have to be careful. This is part of the bribery aspect, the bribery issue, that is the chok. Why? Because it does not make sense. It does not make sense that for $100 he could be bribed, but for $20,000 of his own, no chance, no concern whatsoever. Says the Gemara in Masechet Chulin, page 44b. They bring a pasuk from the prophet Yecheskel. The prophet Yecheskel was a ish kadosh who was asked by Kadosh Baruch Hu to eat in a unusual manner, something that was cooked in some barley cakes that were baked over fuel that was fired by human waste. And Yecheskel is, in essence, asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu why he deserves this decree. He says to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Ezekiel chapter 4, verse 14, Woe HaShem, Elokim, behold, my soul has not become unclean, nor have I eaten nevela or trefa from my youth until now, nor did the flesh of pigul enter my mouth. So the Chamim say, what is he talking about? What is he? Kosher or not kosher? Of course. It's not. We're not concerned whether Ezekiel, the holy prophet, that saw things that is impossible for us to understand, how Kadosh Baruch Hu opened the 7 heavens for him and showed him things that it's impossible for us, for human logic, to understand. We're not concerned about, we're not doubting, we're not even questioning if he ever ate non-kosher food. So Chamim say, no. When it's referring to, behold, my soul has not become unclean, this is referring to, Yecheskel is referring to, he did not allow himself to ever have impure thoughts during the day that would bring about unnecessary uncleanliness at night, meaning that there would be a wasted seed as a result. That even I worried about my thoughts, needless to say, my body. Nor have I ever allowed a nevela or trefa, these forbidden meats. I'm not talking about did I ever eat a McDonald's hamburger, but rather I never even followed those people that they had an animal, they knew that this animal is going to die soon, and said, come on, shecht it already now, slaughter it now, so, because the Torah allows, as long as it's alive, and you slaughter it, it's kosher. Doesn't matter that it was going to die in another, 5 minutes or 5 hours or 5 days. As long as it's healthy, and it doesn't have any things that make it a nevela, a trefa, you shecht it, it's fine. Torah allows it. Yechezkel says, no, I even added an additional chumrah myself, where as soon as it was already suspected this animal is dying, I wouldn't even allow myself to eat such meat. It's not a Torah law. This is something as stringently I added myself. Meaning that Yechezkel was so careful with what he consumed, both spiritually and physically, that he is not understanding this decree. Not understanding why he's getting this decree, why he's getting this test. So then the Gemara continues and says, who is considered a Torah scholar? Who is considered Talmid Chacham? Ezehu Talmid Chacham. The Gemara says, someone who examines a question of trefa for himself, as I said before, his own animal, and rules it forbidden. Rules are forbidden. Why? What's the story here? Rashi says that the question of trefa arises in one of his own animals, and he sees arguments that allow on both sides. They forbid it on one end and they allow it on the other end. If he uses the arguments to allow it, he knows that not only is he avoiding a monetary loss, but also he has something to rely on. He has Torah to rely on. But people could look at a certain way. On the other hand, if he follows the letter of the chok part of it, he's going to overcome his own selfish considerations of a financial loss and rule it not kosher. Because this in itself will prove the integrity that he has, that shows that he's a chacham, that he cannot be enticed by monetary gains or losses. Why is it important that he does it for himself? Because technically, the biggest bias that a person has is his own self-interest. Now, Rav Chisda continues, says that another thing that you'll notice from Chachamim that makes them very special is that aside from being able to examine trefa for themselves and ruling it forbidden, also they exemplify the verse that Shlomo HaMelech said in Proverbs chapter 15 verse 27, Soneh matanot yichyeh. One who abhors gifts shall live. They're not looking for any gifts from anybody, and many times they even reject it. And they give a couple of examples here of how some Chachamim were gifted certain things and they rejected it. They were given certain things, in some cases even invited to come speak, come to the house of the Nasi, of the prince. And in one case, Rabbi Elazar rejected it. But he didn't want to disrespect the Nasi, so he sent a letter saying, if you care about me, you're not going to invite me. Why? Because you want me to die. I don't want any gifts. And it says, Soneh matanot yichyeh, that a person that hates gifts is going to live. So if I accept the gifts, I'm going to die. This is how much they believed in the Torah, how much they lived by the Torah. But on the other hand, you'll see that there is a Rabbi Zera, also invited by the Nasi, and he did come. Why did he come? Why? He didn't, he was a Chacham, so how come he did come? He says, no, I'm coming because I know that they benefit out of my presence. They benefit out of my presence. I'm going to come because I can give them a shiur, and it's not really a gift. It's me coming, I'm giving them something. So you'll see that It's the decision is not always one way or the other. That if, let's say, for example, you gave your rabbi something that if he accepted it, that means that he is really biased or he's not a chacham. No, it all depends. There's one chacham that I know that doesn't need the money. But he accepts the tzedakah from his own family. You ask, why? I mean, if you don't need the money, you have the money, what are you accepting tzedakah from your family? He goes, no, they need it. They need it. Why? They work. They don't learn Torah all day. They work. They observe the basics. But they need some merits for Torah. And the amount that they learn is not enough. So they need to give. They need to give to somebody who learns Torah. So me taking the tzedakah is doing them a chesed. I'm doing them a favor. And that's the logic. And it's 100% correct logic. Now, the Chazon Ish gives us a breakdown of how a person needs to be viewed as when he's a chacham versus when he's not. Where the logical things that we evaluate as regular people are not things that we can pin on the chachamim. They're simply not. Why? Chachamim have a different set of rules, if you will, a different logic. Now, of course, the best way to learn about the chachamim and how great they are is by learning their work, studying what they've written, listening to what they've said. That's the best way. Unfortunately, that's not possible for everybody. So the second best way is to read about them. Read about them, hear about them, and from their life and what happened in their life, we discover someone that is not only nothing like us, but is unique, like an angel among men, as the Chazon Ish likes to describe them as. They look like a man, but they're really an angel among men. One of the wonderful things that you get to learn as you learn more and more Torah is about not only the work and the writings of the Chachamim, but also their lives. And little by little you discover why they became Gdolei Ador. And it's not because of intellect. There are many smart people that are 100% heretics. There are many, many smart people that the world doesn't even know exist. Intellect is not in itself a guarantee for success. There's a lot of smart people out there. But when you see dedication, not only to learning Torah, but also to a certain type of behavior and commitment, you understand why this person became a gadol. One of the giants of our generation is Rav Chaim Kanievsky. Rav Chaim Kanievsky is a person that most people at best saw a picture of him. Maybe you got a blessing from him. Very few people actually took the time to actually read his books before they shared their opinion, especially if it's a negative opinion, about Rav Chaim Kanievsky. And many people will say, oh no, maybe this or maybe that, maybe he's old, maybe he's senile, maybe he doesn't understand, all types of stupid things that people say. Little do they know that the Gemara promises that Chachamim become sharper as they age, while the ignoramuses become more dull in their mind as they age. Meaning that Rav Chaim Kanievsky at this stage of his life is 1.5 million times sharper than the sharpest 20-year-old you will ever find on earth. But, of course, the body itself is weak, but the mind is as sharp as it gets. But he didn't start at 90 years old, Ad 120. He didn't start at this age. He started as a young boy. Up to 6 years old, Rav Chaim, who was born in Poland, he was learning with his father the Stipler Gaon. Then he went to yeshivot, he learned, and he was dedicated. But not dedicated like you see today. Someone is dedicated, does all of his homework, and maybe reads an extra book on the side. No, dedicated to the point that by the time that he was 16 years old, he already completed the entire Shas 4 times. 4 times he completed the entire Shas. Now, for somebody that's never read Gemara in their life, this doesn't mean very much. But anyone that has learned even a Daf Yomi for several months or even several years understands what kind of superhuman achievement that is. Not just for anybody, needless to say for a 16-year-old kid. Today, if you can get a young man to complete the Shas 1 time, by the time they're 15 years old, they're already considered an exceptional person. At 15 years old, you got somebody to complete the Shas, that's already an exceptional boy. Get this kid on the Shidduch train as soon as possible. 18 years old, find him a tzadikah. This kid is going to be different. He's 1,000,000 times more valuable in the eyes of the Haredi world, in the eyes of the world in general, than even a 16-year-old that completed the Shas. The difference between that 1 year is a world away. So to find or even hear a story of someone that lives among us, human beings, that already completed the Shas 4 times by the time he was 16 years old, it's not surprising that he became Gdolado. But of course, people don't understand what all of this means. Perhaps they'll understand the next story. The very same Rav Chaim Kanievsky was involved in a lot of different things. People came to him for a lot of different things. One time there was a Chacham by the name of Rav Natan Einfeld. Rav Natan Einfeld was a Talmid Chacham, very serious about Torah, and of course has his own share of tests. Like the rest of us have tests, he had tests also. But one day he had a test that was mamash one of those tests that you don't even know what to do with. While he's praying, all of a sudden his leg starts to hurt. By the time prayer was finished, he wasn't able to walk. Suddenly, something out of nowhere, and this was a Yom Tov. After Yom Tov was completed, he went to the hospital. Initially, they thought Shem Yishmor was cancer. Later on, after many checks and all types of invasive procedures and so on, they confirmed it wasn't a cancer, but it was something else that's very horrible. And they said that recovery for this thing is going to take no less than a year. In the meantime, Rav Natan is practically disabled, cannot walk. He sends a message to Rav Chaim Kanievsky to please give him a blessing, refuah shlema. He's dealing with a lot of hardship. And one day, on a Thursday, his wife tells him she has to go do shopping for Shabbat. And she's going to lock the door. And he says to her, please lock the door from both ends, because I can't get out of bed anyway to open the door. So just lock the door. And in Israel, usually they have the double locks, lock from the inside, lock from the outside. So as soon as she leaves, a little while later, knocks on the door. He says, who is it? And it's Rav Chaim Kanievsky's helper telling him, I'm here with the Rav. We got your note, and the Rav is coming up. He's going to give you a blessing. So of course, Rav Natan didn't expect this. He's trying to maneuver himself on one leg to get to the door. After he tries to get there, he realizes he doesn't have the key, doesn't know where the key is. By the time he realizes all this, Rav Chaim Kanievsky is already up the flight of stairs and he's at his door. And he says, K'vod Rav, I'm so sorry. I can't open the door. I don't know what did I do. I'm suffering here. It's a lot of agony, K'vod Rav. Rav Chaim Kanievsky says to him, BeEzrat HaShem, you're going to have refuah shlema. Refuah shlema you're going to have. Of course, he's happy he got the blessing, even though he didn't get to see the face of an angel. He got the blessing. He heard the voice. Rav Chaim turns around, very strict schedule that he calls his chovot. His chovot is his debts. What are his debts? The amount of Torah that he needs to learn every single day. A certain amount of pages in Talmud Bavli, 7 pages of Bavli, 7 Yerushalmi. the Sifra, the Sifri, the Zohar, and so on and so forth. The amount of Torah that he learns, Baruch Hashem, is something superhuman in itself to do in a year. He does it in a day, Baruch Hashem, for many years. And every year, he has many siyumim and celebrations on these beautiful amount of Torah that he's been completing each and every year. Now, what does that mean in practical terms? Well, in practical terms, Rav Natan, that was on the other side of the door, that just heard the voice of Rav Kanievsky, notices that he walked back to the bed. He walked back, like the pain is gone. He wasn't sure if he was just dreaming, so he started tapping on his leg to see if it's back to the pain, and realized that miraculously all of the pain has disappeared, as if it never existed. By the time his wife came home, she found him dancing in the middle of the living room like it was Simchat Torah. When they sent news to Rav Kanievsky of the miracle that happened by simply him saying Refuah Shlema twice, Rav Kanievsky in his humility says, what's the big deal? Didn't you guys ever read the teachings in the Gemara not to make light of a blessing of a simpleton? Meaning referring to himself as an idiot, as a regular person. So I give a blessing, but in Shemaim, even the blessing of a regular person like me could create big things. The beauty of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's hands doesn't need to be explained. But when you see it through the voice of his chachamim, of his messengers, through the humility of his loyal servants, you understand more of how beautiful it really is. Because when you see there is, let's say, a rabbi, and that rabbi is impressive, it's not as impressive as when you see his kids, as when you see his students. When you see what comes out of him, the fruits that came out of him, that tells you how great that rabbi really is. When you see HaKadosh Baruch Hu's loyal servants give a blessing that makes miracles, not take an ounce of credit to themselves and even find it strange that you think that they deserve anything. When you see the beauty in his servants, you understand how great the master is. The Baba Sali alav shalom made endless amount of miracles in open daylight. Literally, the type of miracles that the Baba Sali performed on a regular basis would make one think that perhaps we are at the time of Moshe Rabbeinu. Things that were not logical, not humanly possible, were day-to-day life for him. And any time he saw a Jew suffering, he would suffer with them. Many times his Talmidim would find him crying hysterically because somebody came to him, somebody he never knew before, and told him about their troubles, and he would cry over it, pleading with HaKadosh Baruch Hu to chop off both of his hands if it would be something that would help bring a kapara for this suffering Jew. This Baba Sali didn't become Baba Sali because people decided to make him one. The dedication that he had to the Torah, already at a young age, before people today even start learning Gemara, he was already completing the Shas and many, many other books, giving himself as a young teenager, 12 years old, already a schedule of a Mekubal that learns already for decades, waking up at Chatzot in the middle of the night and starting his day in the middle of the night after only a couple of hours of sleep. But not waking up in the middle of the night to go play on a computer, learning Zohar, learning Gemara, learning all of the things all night, going to pray early in the morning at Netz, after going to the mikveh, and then after that having the schedule of an avrech, learning Gemara for 7 hours straight. After that, eating a little bit just to keep the body moving, and going into learning halacha for many hours. Sleeping for the least amount humanly possible, and starting it all over again. Every day, already as a young teenager. One time when he went to visit one of the places in Eretz Yisrael, of course, the people that were hosting were very happy, and so were the kids. They admired the big Mekubah, the Baba Sali, and they peeked through the door to see what does the Baba Sali do after such a long journey. He went into his room. It's late at night. What is he? Is he just going to go to sleep? What does he do? What does he have, a special prayer or something? And the kids looked, saw that the bed was untouched. The Baba Sali took out a small rug that he brought with him, put it on the floor, sat on the floor, and started learning the secrets of the Torah. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours. The kids are taking turns. They're falling asleep themselves. And the Rav is still learning throughout the entire night, 7 hours straight. And at 7 o'clock in the morning, he opens the door, bright and shine, like a young man. And this is already when he's older. Excited to start off the day. Let's go to the mikveh. We have to go pray nets. When he was asked, but Rav, when do you sleep? I mean, it's a... Why do you so stringent on yourself and starting if you didn't sleep that much? The Baba Sali would simply say to them, when I go up to Shamayim, they're going to ask me a lot of questions. But the first question they're going to ask me is, did I keep the laws of the Shulchan Aruch? And they're not going to start with the laws in the end of the Shulchan Aruch. They're going to start off with the first law in the Shulchan Aruch. Did I wake up early to serve my master? With zeal, with excitement. And if I don't have a good answer for that, what good are the rest of my answers? The Baba Sali saw things that literally didn't even belong in that generation. People could not believe what they were seeing in their own eyes. There was a young man that got injured in the war in Israel, lost his ability to walk, came to the Baba Sali, cried to the Baba Sali that he's a young man, he's only 20 years old, can't walk. They are proposing for him to have endless amount of surgeries to maybe one day have the ability to possibly walk in somewhere or another, but it was a surgery that everyone knew required miracles. The Baba Sali looks at the young man, he says to him, do you keep Shabbat? The young man says, no. He says, you put on tefillin? He says, no. You eat kosher? You know, one of those, I take. The Baba Sali says to him, you're lucky that HaShem only took your legs. Because somebody who doesn't keep Torah doesn't deserve anything from HaShem. The young man took those words to heart and started crying hysterically. And there are people there watching. And the Baba Sali says to him, if I give you a blessing for Refuah Shlema, you promise to keep the Torah? After a few moments of thinking, the young man said, yeah. Baba Sali says, get up. Excuse me? Get up! Yelled at him. From the fear of the Chacham's voice yelling at him, the guy got up and couldn't believe that he's standing up, walking like a normal human being. People saw this, couldn't believe it. He himself couldn't believe it. He started running around, went to the next Bet Knesset. People say, hey, what are you doing? We're trying to learn here. He goes, you don't understand. A few minutes ago, I was a paraplegic. I couldn't walk. Miracles like this happen on a regular basis. There was a young man married already for almost 10 years. No kids. Comes to the Baba Sali with his rabbi and sees that the Baba Sali is having one of his seudot. And the rabbi comes to the Baba Sali and says to him, Kvod Harav, this guy over here is a good guy. His name is Yaakov. No kids. Many years already. Maybe the Rav can give him a blessing. The Rav looks at the guy. He pours a cup of arak. Gives it to him. What's your name? The guy says, Yaakov. No kids? He says, no. Let's drink. The guy drinks. Moment later, the Rav looks at him. What's your name? The guy says, Yaakov. Baba Sali pours another glass, gives it to him, he goes, no kids? He says, no. Just drink. Repeats the same thing. He finishes that. Baba Sali looks at him again. What's your name? And the guy's confused, but he doesn't know what to do. He just answers the questions. He says, Yaakov. He goes, no kids, huh? He says, no. Pours another alak. Here. Drink. He drinks. This repeats itself. Again and again. At the 7th cup, he says to him, what's your name? He says, Yaakov. No kids? No. Drink. He drinks. 8th time. What's your name? Yaakov. No kid? Huh? Pours the cup. Drink. He falls with the cup on the floor. The rabbi comes to him with a smile. He says to the Rav, for the Rav, he's our driver to go back home. So okay, don't worry. No more drink for him. That year, the man had his first baby. The next year, second baby. Next year, third baby. 7 kids. 8th, miscarriage. No more kids after that. These types of miracles don't happen to people because of their clothing, because of their age, because they read some book. The purification process that these chachamim go through is not something that is just done by going to a mikveh or doing something superficial. Everyone wants to look like the big chachamim. Everyone wants to think like the chachamim. But I promise you that the sacrifices the chachamim made were not sacrifices that everybody will be jumping on board for. Says the Chazon Ish that to find the chacham is to find treasure, because this is a person that does not have your type of logic, your bias, and you don't need to concern yourself with thinking that perhaps since you would do such a thing, maybe he would do such a thing. They don't have that kind of mindset. Now, of course, there are many times that the people will not get the message. And there comes the Gemara to tell us a little bit more clarity. More clarity of what's at stake if we don't listen. Says the Gemara, based on what the Chazon Ish says, that when a person doubts the Chachamim in a similar fashion like they would doubt themselves or doubt their friends or doubt regular people, where they would have a hir'u, a charabam, where they would think that they made a decision because it benefits them. They said this, or wrote this, or ate this, or bought this, because of some personal agenda, not because it's the truth. Chazon Ish says, this fault finder will be violating the prohibition of questioning the decision of one's rabbi. We are certain that the sages are above such lowly considerations, and only ignorant people of little knowledge who cannot recognize or understand the soul of a truly wise person are capable of suspecting them. Now, anyone that suspects the Chachamim of such minimal things has a certificate from the Chazon Ish that they are a fool, an ignoramus, and literally the lowest of creation. But what does the Gemara say? Masechet Sanhedrin, page 110a. Amar Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda said, Kol hacholek al rabo kecholek al hashchina. Whoever challenges his Torah teacher is like one who challenges the divine presence itself. As it's stated, the same Datan and Aviram, who were summoned by the assembly, who contended against Moshe and Aaron among the assembly of Korach, when they contended against God. This is a verse in the book of Numbers, chapter 26, verse 9. Rav Chama, the son of Rav Chanina, said, whoever picks a quarrel with the rabbi is like one who picks a quarrel with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. For it stated they were the water of strife, where the children of Israel quarreled with God. Rav Chanina Bar Papa says, whoever complains about his teacher is regarded as if he complained about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As it stated, not against us are your complaints, but against God, says Moshe Rabbeinu to Am Yisrael. Rabbi Abahu says, whoever thinks ill of his teacher is regarded as if he thinks ill about HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. For it stated, and the people spoke against God and against Moshe. Now you're going to say, wait, but my teacher is not Moshe. That's the point. HaKadosh Baruch Hu named Moshe the prophet of all prophets. So you know who the prophet of all prophets are. He named Aaron HaKohen. So you know who the Kohen Gadol is. He named Yeshua ben Nun as the one that continued the Masoret. But what about the 70 elders? No names. Why no names? So you know that although your rabbi is not Moshe Rabbeinu and not Aaron HaKohen, you cannot say that he is not like one of the 70 elders, since you don't know who those 70 elders are. To teach us that if your rabbi is someone that is following the truth, someone that knows Torah, and is not scared to teach you that Torah, even if that lesson is going to offend you, offend him, lose, win, without any personal bias. Simply, you have benefited in having a teacher that's going to teach you what the Torah says. To even think ill of him is like thinking ill of HaShem. Now, of course, the naysayers are going to tell you, oh, see, this is like a cult. This is people are turning themselves into God and they're ruining Judaism. Says the Gemara, there were people in the past that did that same thing. They did that same thing where they said you shouldn't have so much honor to this rabbi. He's just a rabbi. You shouldn't have such fear of these chachamim. You're also chacham. Who are some of those people? The example that they gave is Korach and his followers. Of course, 250 of the followers were rabbis themselves. And not just rabbis, but rabbis that Moshe Rabbeinu himself picked to be the leaders. They were chosen by Moshe Rabbeinu, and they spit in Moshe Rabbeinu's face and went against him. Why? Korach's money was a little bit higher than what Moshe Rabbeinu was offering him, which was simply the truth. So Korach, Datan ve'Aviram, their families, with the exception of Korach's kids, that by their own tshuva was saved in the last second, and 250 of the biggest rabbis followed Korach and went against Moshe. Thought ill of Moshe. Said, we don't want to listen. We think that you have an agenda. We think that you're making stuff up. We don't see it anywhere in the Torah that it says this. This is your chok. It's illogical. Rava says, what's the meaning of when it's written, if God will create a phenomenon and the earth will open its mouth? What is the meaning of this? This is a verse in the book of Numbers, chapter 16, verse 30, where Moshe Rabbeinu is pleading to HaShem during the disaster argument with Korach and his followers. Moshe Rabbeinu is saying that if God will create a phenomenon and the earth will open his mouth, what is this? Rava elaborates. Moshe Rabbeinu said before the Holy One, blessed is he, if Gehenom is a creation, meaning that if Gehenom had already been created so that Korach and his followers can be sent there, good. And if not, then let HaKadosh Baruch Hu create it. What is Moshe Rabbeinu asking for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to create Gehenom? Of course, that's not possible since Gehenom was already created in Bereshit. So comes the Gemara and says, no, nothing new under the sun. Rather, Moshe Rabbeinu was praying for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to bring the opening of Gehenom to where they are. Because they know that Gehenom had 3 entrances. There's one in Yerushalayim, there's one in the ocean, and there's one in the desert. So we don't know where it is in the desert. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if it's here, good. If not, bring it here. And open it up and put Korach and his followers in there. Why? To make sure that this eliminates any doubts that anybody has about Moshe Rabbeinu. Rabbi Bar Chama says that once he was walking on the road and a certain Arab merchant came up to him and says, hey, Yehud, you want to come see something? So what do you want to show me? He says, you want to see where Korach is? Rabbi Bar Chama says, of course, show me. He follows the Arab. And then they get to a place, and the Arab takes he shows him that there's smoke coming out of the ground, he takes a ball of wool, soaks it in water to make sure it's really, really wet, meaning less flammable, puts it inside the hole that the smoke's coming out of. And despite being soaked in water, the wool comes out like lava, completely full of fire. Then the Arab tells the Rabbi Bar Chana, listen carefully to what's being said here. Rabbi Bar Chana puts his ear down and he hears, Moshe v'Torato emet, ve'anachnu shakranim. Moshe and his Torah are true, and we are liars. And then the Arab who studied this area already many years says to Rabbi Bar Chana, every 30 days, the Gehenom that these people are in returns exactly here, as if they're being stirred like meat in a pot. And they keep saying the same thing, that Moshe and his Torah are true, and they are liars. So Rashi says over here, what does it mean that every 30 days? Every Rosh Chodesh, Korach and his followers are judged all over again, and they're brought up to that same place that they made their mistake of a lifetime. Now, this is not a parable. This is not a fairy tale. This is one of our Chachamim, Rabbi Bar Chana, that's mentioned in every other page in the Gemara. Eyewitness. So what does the Torah say about the heretics that will tell you, no, it doesn't make any sense that God would punish so severely 3,000 years already, 3,300 years of Gehenom. It doesn't make any sense. Doesn't it say only 1 year? Obviously, this shows that these people either are ignoramuses who don't know anything about anything, or it shows that they are simply shakranim, liars, in order to serve their own bias, their own agenda. Why do we have to go over these things time and time again? Number one, it's mentioned. Number two, it's all across the Torah. And number three, because the Satan works overtime. And therefore we have to also. One of the ways of the Satan is to make people forget. Now, although this can be used for good, I heard Rav Mizrahi Sheikhye recently say that he ran into somebody recently who was not exactly one of the people that you would think would be a Rabbi Mizrahi fan. He's one of these liberal types of people, but he recognized Rabbi Mizrahi. And he was very nice to him. And Rabbi Mizrahi said to him, how do you know me? He goes, I don't know, I heard about you. I don't remember where. I remember I saw something. I go, okay, so why don't you watch my movie? He goes, what movie? He goes, Purpose of Life. He goes, okay, great, I'll listen to it. Rabbi Mizrahi says, you know where you heard about me? He doesn't even realize, but you know where you heard about me? You heard about me from all the Reshaim that spoke against me in the news. He just doesn't remember that that's where he heard about me. So he just remembers my name. And he sees me, so he doesn't have an opinion. Back then he had an opinion. But since he doesn't watch, now that worked for good. Unfortunately, that works the opposite too. We tell people, warning them against certain heretics, whether it be Manis or the others that are out there. But lo and behold, if people don't continue watching the shiurim, or even continue hearing the same thing, the Satan, the Yetzer Hara, the Malach HaMavit, works overtime to make sure to say, wait a minute, if it hasn't been mentioned recently that they're bad, that they're heretics, maybe it's okay now. Maybe the coast is clear. Maybe they made peace between them. Maybe he did tshuva. Maybe it's no longer a problem. Maybe he was just referring to something that happened in the past. And all types of other reasons Satan puts into people's minds. Hence the reason of why the Torah itself mentions it countless times across the board of how you have to constantly warn people against the evil, even more so than teaching them about the good. Now I know in the public today it's very common to teach people, oh, go do good here, do good there, do a mitzvah, do this. It's good to teach good. But David HaMelech says, Su merav v'aseh tov. First and foremost, run away from evil. Then worry about doing good. Why? Because if you do good, but that good is on top of a foundation of bad, the good is worthless. If you do good when there's no bad, then that good is priceless. If you simply stop doing bad, by default, whatever you're doing is good. But if you do good on top of bad, that good turns into bad in itself. Because the bad is poisonous. Now, when people are teaching on a regular basis heretical things such as God needs us, and not only they're teaching it, but they're creating fruits, where people that weren't so bad in the past are turning bad, because they see that the bad is working. People that are newly educated are being educated with heretical thoughts. You have to constantly address these issues, not only to remind yourself that until Mashiach comes, this job is ours, each one of us, but on top of it, the danger is still very much in front of us, just like it was when it was first discovered. And in fact, the danger only continues to grow so long as the world remains quiet. So the Torah tells us in the Gemara Masechet Sanhedrin of how Moshe Rabbeinu prayed for HaKadosh Baruch Hu to bring Gehinnom. In the midrash Rabbah, Parashat Ki Tisa, HaKadosh Baruch Hu mentions Manis Friedman, Y.Y. Jacobson, and all of the other heretics that say stupid things, such as God needs you. Where so? Midrash Rabbah, Parashat Ki Tisa, Parashat Membet 42, in section 3. It says the following. Kadosh Baruch Hu and Moshe Rabbeinu are having this discussion, Mount Sinai. About what? The golden calf just happened, disaster, fine. HaKadosh Baruch Hu complains to Moshe Rabbeinu, woe to them, for they have moved away from me. Devastations onto them, for they have rebelled against me. I redeemed them, but they have spoken lies about me. This is a quote in Hosea chapter 7 verse 13. God said, they have separated themselves from me by worshiping the golden calf. As it stated, woe to them, for they have moved away from me. Now, is there a person who takes a bad thing in exchange for a good one? That's what the midrash is asking. A person who has placed before him a pearl and a coal, would he leave the pearl and take the coal? Yet this is what the people of Israel have done to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. For they have forsaken the Creator, the life force of the universe, and have chosen the dread, the lifeless idols. Fine. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says catastrophe is destined to come upon such people. But then there's the question. What's the question? It didn't just say that they have rebelled against me. It also said they lied. So the midrash says, what lie? What lie did they say? And the Yefet Torah says that this is a prophecy, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying this lie is going to happen in the future. Which lie is this? Says HaKadosh Baruch Hu to Moshe Rabbeinu, I redeemed them, but they have spoken lies about me. What lies did Am Yisrael utter against the Holy One? Blessed is He. What lies? Comes Rabbi Akiva and says, the Am Yisrael, what they say, meaning what they're going to say in the future. What do they say? What exodus? What exodus did he do? What salvation did he bring? Did he really occupy himself with us? Meaning, did he execute the exodus from Egypt for our sake? He was occupied with himself, meaning the exodus was for his own sake. He redeemed himself. He didn't, but he did not redeem us. As it's stated from before, there's a verse that they base it on, the book of Samuel. From before your people that you redeemed for yourself from Egypt, a nation of families and its God. In so many words, the midrash says as follows. These heretics are going to come in the future. The same people that worshipped an idol. They're going to be reincarnated in the future. The same Erev Rav of the past that worshipped an idol. They're going to be reincarnated. They're not going to come and bring a new golden calf. No. They're going to give a new type of golden calf, a new type of heretical thought, a new type of idolatry. What are they going to say? What good did God do for us? Whatever He did, He needed to do for Himself, because God needs us. Before, the Yefet Torah says, before He took us out of Egypt, people knew that there was, a God. But He was something distant, far away. People had local idols, all types of things. Once He made the miracles, He made Himself known. So in reality, who did He really redeem? He redeemed Himself. That's the logic of the Reshaim. They're going to come back in a generation before Mashiach. They're going to tell people, God needs you. No less than you need Him. That is the same people that worshipped an idol. And those very same people will tell you, what punishment are you talking about? It doesn't say anything about punishment. Can you really burn a soul? Ha ha ha! Midrash Rabbah, Parashat Pekudei. Parashat Nun Aleph 51, section 7. A conversation that even preceded Moshe Rabbeinu. A conversation in a special covenant between Avraham Avinu and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Holy One, blessed is He, showed Avraham Avinu 4 things at the covenant between the parts. Torah, Gehenom, offerings, and the foreign kingdoms. As it says, they bring a verse from Genesis chapter 15, verse 17 and 18. So it happened, the sun set, and it was very dark. Behold, there was a smoky furnace and a torch of fire that passed between these pieces. On that day HaShem made a covenant with Avram. This phrase, smoky furnace and a torch of fire, is alluding to the Torah and to Gehenom. And it's mentioned again later on in chapter 20, verse 15. A torch of fire alludes to the Torah, as it says the connection of the giving of the Torah. The entire people saw, this is an Exodus, the entire people saw the thunder and the torches, the sounds of the shofar, and the smoking mountain. The people saw and trembled and stood from afar. A smoky furnace alludes to Gehenom, as it's written, in connection with the punishment of Gehenom. For behold, the day of judgment is coming, burning like an oven, when all the wicked people and all of the evil doers will be like straw, says the prophet Malachi chapter 3 verse 19. Then HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed Avraham the offerings, and then He showed him the foreign kingdoms that will subjugate his descendants. Which kingdoms? 4 kingdoms, represented by different words in the verses. The dread is Babylon. Darkness is Persia or Media. The great is referring to Greece, and the fell upon him is referring to Edom, the last exile that we're in currently. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kol Yemim Sheyu B'naich, Yashiu Banecha, Asukim B'Torah U'B'Korbanot, Em Nitzulim Mehem. The Holy One, blessed is He, said to Avraham Avinu, as long as your children involve themselves with the study of Torah and the bringing of sacrifices, the offerings, they will be saved from Gehenom and from the foreign kingdoms. But there will be a time in the future when your children will cause the offerings to become null. And at that point, which do you prefer, Avraham, that your children will be subjected to? Gehenom or the subjugation of the foreign kingdoms? Rav Chanina Bar Papa says Avraham chose the subjugation of the foreign kingdoms. What does this mean? Before we get to the second part, this means HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed Avraham Gehenom. He also showed him disasters, tragedies, holocausts, pogroms, destruction of the first Bet HaMikdash, destruction of the second Bet HaMikdash, the slavery in Egypt, the wars against Amalek from generation after generation, the Spanish Inquisition, the Holocaust in Nazi Germany, the pogroms, the murders of Jews in England in the early 1100s, 900 years ago. Constant anti-Semitism wherever they go. Where they build and the Goyim come to destroy. Persecution. All types of evil. Blood being spilled on the streets for no reason. Avraham chose this. Chose the Holocaust, being repeated multiple times throughout the last few thousand years, over Gehenom. Now we're not talking about Gehenom for the individual that's going to desecrate Shabbat and waste seed. No, that's still there. We're talking about a general Gehenom for everybody, for the sins that they make. Avraham saw that you're going to have these kingdoms. They're going to rule with the sword, killing people for no reason, simply because they are believers in the Torah. Killing them even if they don't believe in the Torah, just because their mother did. Killing them for no reason, even if they don't believe in the Torah and their mother didn't believe in the Torah, but their grandmother believed in the Torah. Murdering them for no reason. Stealing everything they have. Torture. Nightmare. Kicking them out of a country that they helped build. Thousands of years of this. Avraham Avinu chose this over the very same Gehenom that Y.Y. Jacobson and Manus Friedman and the rest of the heretics out there say doesn't exist. What did HaKadosh Baruch Hu think of the choice that Avraham Avinu made? Says the midrash about what Avraham Avinu chose. How do we know that he chose these disasters to be tortured by these kingdoms until Mashiach comes over Gehenom? How do we know? For it says, how could one enemy soldier pursue 1,000 Jewish soldiers, if not that their rock, which is referring to Avraham Avinu, their rock had sold them out. This is one of the curses that's mentioned in Deuteronomy chapter 32 verse 30. That one enemy soldier will defeat 1,000 Jews, Shem Yishmor, if we don't follow the Torah. This alludes to Avraham Avinu, for it says, look at the rock from which you were hewn. Look to Avraham Avinu. And the verse in Deuteronomy concludes saying, and HaShem had delivered them. This teaches that the Holy One, blessed is He, agreed with Avraham, that foreign subjugation was a far better option. And Rav Huna said, in the name of Rav Acha, and also Rebbe HaKadosh, the elder, that Avraham Avinu reached his decision in another way. When God gave him the choice of Gehenom or foreign kingdoms, Avraham stood bewildered, and he did not know what to choose, until the Holy One, blessed is He, said that he should choose the foreign kingdoms. For it says, you mounted a mortal over our head, meaning you subjected us to the dominion of foreign kingdoms. We entered fire and water, and this is a reference to Gehenom, which is comprised of half fire and half hail. And you brought us out into abundance. This is a verse in Tehillim, chapter 66, verse 12. This then is the meaning of, these are the teachings of the Tabernacle of Testimony. What is the testimony? That as long as the Jewish people are engaged in both the study of Torah and the bringing of the offerings, the tabernacle will be a testimony to them that they will neither descend to Gehenom nor be subjugated by the foreign kingdoms. So if the midrash, the Gemara, the rest of the Chachamim discuss Gehenom, how could somebody says this Gehenom doesn't exist, or it's limited, or all types of other mumbo jumbo? Says the Ruach Chaim, commentary on Masechet Avot, chapter 5, Mishnah number 8. Thanks to my dear friend Rav Sebag, who brought this to me. The Ruach Chaim says there are 7 types of retributions that come to the world for the 7 types of sins. The term baim, which means come, implies that it comes by itself. How does this retribution, this punishment, come by itself? Where it's brought in a Bereta by Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi regarding the matters of Gehenom. And it's shocking to hear of the greatness of the suffering of Gehenom. What is it? For where is their mercy? He who has mercy on all of his handiworks. The answer is that this is not at all in the category of punishment. Meaning the 7 levels of punishments is not necessarily punishment per se, but rather that the evil is something that pursues the wicked, as Shlomo Melech says in Proverbs chapter 13, verse 21. Meaning that the sin that the person committed, the sin itself punishes the person. And this is the same with Gehenom, where our sages taught in the Gemara Masechet Eruvin, page 19a, that the wicked, Gehenom is made deep for them. And likewise the prophet Isaiah said, behold, all of you who kindle fire, who give power to the flames, go in the flame of your fire. In the flames you have kindled. For through your own sins they generate the fire of Gehenom. The soul which sins is in Gehenom, immediately after the sin, only that the person does not sense it. And therefore he wrote, come, that these 7 retributions come to the world, meaning that they come on their own. So here you have another one of the great sages, brings that the punishment, horrific punishment, is not something that HaShem is looking to do, but rather is simply what a person has done to themselves. Now one would say, yeah, but maybe HaShem could just simply eliminate that, because He loves you. Why would He love you if you express that you hate Him your whole life? Why would HaKadosh Baruch Hu become the very judge that he forbids becoming. The very same judge that the Chazon Ish is telling us we're not allowed to be. The judge that is bribed. Why would HaKadosh Baruch Hu ever, in your crazy mind, think that's even possible that Hashem will become that bribe judge? Now, of course, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not looking to punish his creation. He's not even happy destroying Amalek. It's an eventual, inevitable outcome. But it's not something that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will celebrate. And this we learn also when the Malachim, the angels, wanted to celebrate when HaKadosh Baruch Hu was destroying the Egyptians. HaKadosh Baruch Hu rebuked the angels, told them, my creation is being destroyed and you want to dance? The angels responded saying, yeah, but the Jews are dancing. He says, the Jews are allowed to dance. Why? Because they suffered under their subjugation. What did you suffer? So there's a very big difference. There's a certain behavior that we have and a certain behavior that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has. Don't compare the two. The mercy that he has is much greater than the mercy you can ever have. Now you're going to say, wait, but I would never punish somebody the way that Hashem punishes somebody in Gehenom. And the answer is, yes, you are. Why? You're punishing yourself with those punishments by not following him. When a person does not follow the Torah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they're punishing themselves, both in this world and the next. Now, of course, the heretics are going to tell you that God owes you an apology, and God needs you, and all types of other nonsense. But if you notice, each one of the things that Chachamim typically bring to people, they bring sources. And not just sources, but sources after sources, and they also have friends that agree with them. One of the great things that we learn in this upcoming holiday, Megillat Esther, is that the salvation of Am Yisrael depends on providing sources. The Mishnah in Avot says that when Mordechai found out that these two people wanted to kill Achashverosh, and he saved his life, this was written in a book. And the reward was never paid to Mordechai. That salvation comes later. But why was Mordechai even written in the book? Why was Mordechai written in the book? Because when Esther told Achashverosh about this conspiracy against them, she could have easily said, listen, I just heard that these two people are trying to kill you. Or, I have a bad feeling about these two people. Or, I heard, but I don't remember who. But anyway, these two people are trying to kill you. She could have easily taken the credit for herself. Why? That's what people do all the time. People do that all the time. They read your book. They mention it in a shiur, but they won't mention you. In fact, the Mishnah in Avot says that when a person brings sources of where he heard the Torah that he heard, he's bringing the salvation to Am Yisrael, just like Esther brought the salvation to Am Yisrael by simply saying that Mordechai is the source of this information. Something that seems superficial, not important really. The most important thing is to save the king's life, right? No. The most important thing is to stick to the truth from beginning to end. And Chachamim learned from that in the Mishnah in Avot and says that when you bring your sources of where you heard what you heard, you're bringing a salvation. Now the ego will tell a person, listen, if I heard this Dvar Torah by this rabbi, and this rabbi is quoting the Gemara, then I can just quote the Gemara. The rabbi says, Gemara, Masechet such and such, so I'll mention the same thing, and I'll say, Gemara, Masechet such and such. Isn't that quoting the sources? No, that's being a liar. How do we know? Look at how the Chachamim, the greatest Chachamim in history, speak on a simple example. The Chida, in his Sefer Dvash Lefi, he brings the midrash Eliyahu, page 57, that quoted the Sefer Yad Yosef, explaining that Purim actually encompasses all facets of all the Torah festivals. And it elaborates the whole thing about who, what, when, and how. But the Chida, who was one of the greatest sages over the last few hundred years, could have easily said, Sefer Yad Yosef, the book Yad Yosef, said such and such. He's not going to not mention anything, say it's his idea. He could just simply say, the Sefer Yad Yosef. Why does he have to add the extra ink to say, no, the Sefer Midrash Eliyahu brings the Sefer Yad Yosef? Why? Why can't you just tell us the original source? Because that's not true. I didn't hear it. I didn't see it. I didn't recognize it. Even if I read the Sefer Yad Yosef, it didn't stand out to me like it did when I heard it again, or even for the first time, from the Midrash Eliyahu. Meaning that a person can say, the Gemara said such and such, or the book said such and such. But the reality is, if you heard it from somebody, or you read it from somebody who quoted that, what you're really supposed to do is bring them and then the source. Why? Because that's the honesty that brings salvation. And what does the dishonesty do? Very simple. When somebody doesn't feel like the Masoret, the tradition that we have to bring the salvation by quoting where we got what we got and being particular about it and thinking it's too much, it's a waste of time, it's not necessary. You know what that leads to? First, they stop mentioning the source that gave them the source. Eventually, they stop mentioning the source. And they just give you ideas. And eventually, they don't even have a source for what they say, because they simply decide to become the source. And inevitably become like the heretics and the apikosim that create Torah that's not from Shemayim. A Torah that's a new religion. A Torah that's full of heresy, that's antithetical to our real Torah. When our Chachamim, when our holy Chachamim mentioned the sources of the sources, they weren't doing it because they were looking to give anybody credit, to make them more popular. They weren't doing it because they didn't study enough themselves. They weren't doing it because they were really humble, even though they were. They were doing it because that is what brings the salvation. That is emet. And no other emet, no other truth is acceptable. When anyone ever spends a few moments, you can look it up online probably, and you read up the daily study routine of the Chida, the very same Chida we just spoke about. How much Torah he studied each day, I don't know how it's possible to do it in a lifetime. In one day, how much Torah he was studying. So, it's not so hard to believe that he also read the Midrash Eliyahu 1,000,000 times, not once, 1,000,000 times. But yet, the Chida had the need to bring the source that brought the source. And he's not alone. All of the Chachamim act this way. Across the board. If they read the source directly, that's what they bring. If they got it through another source, that's what they bring. I got it from this one. Rabbi such and such mentioned this, and he brought this. Why? Because we need to stick to the truth as it is. And a critical part of our truth is the Masoret, is the tradition. To know that not only do we have Torah from Mount Sinai, but it's the same Torah. And I have friends when I mention my Torah. When I mention my Torah and I bring you another source that says what I said and I got it from him, that means I have a friend. I have somebody that's in the same boat with me. This is one of the things you look for. When you learn Torah and you have an idea, you look for a friend, you look for a sage that said the same thing you're trying to say. But when you all of a sudden start speaking without mentioning anything, and before you know it, no one ever mentioned what you're saying. And whatever you're saying, the crowd tries to make sense of it by saying, no, this is similar to what I saw somewhere else, not exactly, but maybe, and in essence giving the audience work to do to try to justify your lies. This, Rabotai, is the difference between Chachamim that didn't need to prove their honesty and integrity. Didn't need to prove that they only paskin kosher when it's kosher and taref when it's taref. They didn't need to do it. It was obvious, but they still did it. And then the charlatans that look honest, that portray honesty. But if you look at their footsteps, it's full of lies. But they'll tell you it's good intentions. And Moshe Rabbeinu and Avraham Avinu in the midrash says, the road to Gehenom is full of good intentions. BeEzrat HaShem, this too will be a chizuk for all of us that at times feel like we have good intentions, but the intentions are our own and not the way of the sages. It will give us chizuk to stick with the Chachamim no matter what, even if it doesn't agree with our knowledge. Because we know they don't think like us. Because when they say something, they're telling you the opinion of the Torah. And the Torah, even if you've been studying it for a few years or more, doesn't necessarily mean that you have Da'at Torah. To gain Da'at Torah takes a lot more than just a few years. When a person wants to do the will of Hashem, they have to make sure that no matter what, if they see something is working, they continue doing it. If there's issues, if there's bumps, those are expectable. Those are acceptable. Those are expected. You don't abandon ship and you don't change the way just because something is inconvenient. In the road to the ultimate truth, to Gan Eden, there's going to be a lot of things that are unexpected, a lot of bumps, and a lot of interactions with the Yetzer Hara and his messengers trying to veer you off to a different direction. Telling you, these laws don't make sense. These restrictions don't make sense. They're not logical. Our holy sages told us, you're right, they're not logical. But that's what makes them holy. Tiskuli mitzvot rabot, and BeEzrat HaShem will learn again later this week. Baruch Adonai leolam, amen v'amen. There's going to be a new campaign, BeEzrat HaShem, to continue helping the poor. I already sent some money today to help a bunch of people, Baruch Hashem, in Tel Zion, and we have quite a few people in Eretz Yisrael that need help, Avrechim, different special Jewish neshamot that simply cannot make it. through the month on a regular basis, needless to say, during the holidays. Each year we do several campaigns specifically to help the poor. Now more than ever we need your help because for a few reasons. Number one, it's the cost of everything. Anyone that follows Israeli news, the cost of everything in Israel has skyrocketed to the point where people are refraining from buying things like soda and yogurt and a lot of different goods that simply have become unaffordable. Vegetables have skyrocketed. Now more than ever we need your help.
Ahasuerus, the Persian king, made a feast filled with bling. For his 3rd year of reign he did celebrate. The Jews came happily, they didn't even deliberate. The feast was simply a ball. Food and drink filled every hall. HaShem was angered by the reckless behavior. Haman's evil decree was punishment, so our evil actions would waver. Ahasuerus had a ton to drink. Queen Vashti he wished to bring, but this was not her wish, and the king she did scorn. After all, she grew a tail and a horn. The blood of Ahasuerus came to a boil. That's when the advisors came to toil, to decide what should be done with the queen who refused to come. The evil Haman, behold, his plan he so expertly did mold. To kill the queen he desired. This plan Ahasuerus admired. Higher and higher Haman rose. A new law was proposed. All must bow to Haman on high. But Mordechai HaTzadik did not comply. King Ahasuerus began his quest to find a queen who would be the best. Esther, Mordechai's niece, was taken and adorned with fleece. Haman's hatred for Mordechai did swell. All the Jews he wished to dispel. So Haman convinced the king to sign the wicked decree with his signet ring. The cries of the Jews filled the city. Our situation was truly a pity. Mordechai prayed and Esther dreaded, for approaching the king could land her beheaded. King Ahasuerus sat in his yard. With beauty and grace he did regard his queen Esther at last. For her his scepter he did cast. To her own special feast Esther did invite the king and Haman, who was filled with delight. Yet when Mordechai refused to bow, this Haman did not allow. King Ahasuerus made a request for Haman to give his best advice on how to reward a favor. But this honor Haman wrongly did savor. Since Haman believed the gift was for him, he conveyed his advice with a giant grin. You shall dress him in the king's royal robes. With the crown shall he parade the roads. Ahasuerus commanded without delay. Haman shall create this grand display. For Mordechai, who was the one deserving, it was him who Haman would be serving. A second invitation Esther did extend for Ahasuerus to attend. The queen begged at the feast that the decree against her nation decreased. At once the king did rule to hang Haman the fool. Poof went Haman's vicious decree. Of the Jews' victory HaShem did guarantee. Mordechai strode through town, looking so refined. Atop his head the king's crown did shine. This was not his only reward to reap, for Haman's house was his to keep. Haman's 10 sons we did hang. Our enemies were defeated with a big bang. That is why, to this day, we celebrate Purim in a special way. Mishloach manot we give to a friend. A special mishta we make sure to attend. And matanot lavyonim to the poor we send. We dress up as a queen, king, or sword in order for v'nahafochu to be restored.